Fostering connection through vulnerability, the People Pleaser podcast validates struggles, celebrates growth, and inspires positive change. Together, let's embrace authenticity, challenge patterns, and evolve with compassion. Hello and welcome, everyone, to the People Pleaser podcast. It's Corie. I am your host, and I am just happy to be here. I am coming down from 2 busy days at work. I'm working as a server at a very busy restaurant, breakfast spot. And the work is like kicking my body's ass a little bit. I'm just like, wow, I'm dead. But I am still trying to figure out when to record and if I should be changing my days. And there's part of me that's just feeling like really, I just want to keep Tuesdays. I like Tuesdays. And I noticed that a lot of the podcasts I listen to come out on Wednesdays. And so I don't know if that ever plays into anyone's experience. Like if you are loyal to listening to your podcasts on like the day they come out, or if you just kind of chip away at them. But I'm just not fully ready to switch my days. I've just grown accustomed to coming out on Tuesday mornings. And you know, what's cool is that I just spoke with my mom on the phone last night, and she had spent the whole weekend processing apples. So my mom and stepdad have 2 apple trees, and they just harvested them all. And now they have the task of making applesauce and apple chips and apple pies and apple pie filling, and just going to town on the apples. And my mom says that she spent the whole weekend peeling and coring apples and listening to my podcast. And it was so timely that she shared that, because it's been, her feedback to me is that it's been hard to listen, and she's really enjoyed listening to the podcast. And what she finds challenging is that I see her kind of not just relating into a lot of my people-pleasing tendencies that I've shared, but she's also expressed a sense of responsibility for why I am the way I am. And her belief is that, a lot of our characteristics are traits that have been passed down. And the reason that just tied in so well is that this week in my master's program of counseling psychology, we were examining a case study, and it was a fictional case study. And we were asked to think of something about yourself and like a trait about yourself. The aim was to kind of examine, what do you think you have developed in terms of like your personality or characteristics that are a product of the environment that you grew up in, and what are like biological, like what have been passed down genetically through your family. And my share was that I do think I learned some of my people-pleasing tendencies from my mom. And that's not like, I'm not sitting here blaming my mom. I actually find it really interesting, because what I realized is that, we were both the firstborn, like of our siblings, and we were the eldest daughter. So we were both girls, and we were both the oldest of our siblings. So I want to do an entire episode on like birth order and how that plays into just the roles we take on within our family and then beyond. But I know for my mom and I, we both assumed quite a bit of responsibility, just being that we were the eldest females in our house. And the other thing I kind of put together was that both of us grew up with alcoholic fathers. So my mom's dad was a drinker, and he was quite absent, not due to his drinking per se. I mean, that was a layer, but his work took him physically away. And my dad and I had, a beautiful relationship, but I didn't grow up in the same house as my dad. So in that sense, he was absent from my day to day. I always kind of think of him as being like consistently unavailable. So at least I had that consistency, but I didn't grow up in the same house as him. And as I grew older, I realized that my dad also had an alcohol dependency. So it was just it was just an interesting series of things coming together, me getting this feedback from my mom and then having this sort of self-examination in my master's class, my program. And I mean, I'm not a parent myself, so I can't speak to the experience of parenting, but I know that my mom is like, it's hard not to take some of that on, even though I am now 38 years old. And I would say that I've been more in control of my own life than, she ever was, as my parent. But I do believe that some of our strongest personality traits do come to us at a very young age. And that's not a bad thing necessarily. It can be a bad thing, depending on the situation. But I don't see any of the way that I show up in the world as like a bad thing. I don't hold anybody responsible. I'm not like, oh, I wish I wasn't this way. Like, I just am who I am. And no, I couldn't be this version of me without my mom, but I couldn't be this version of me without a lot of people and a lot of things and a lot of environmental moments and experiences throughout my life. And I just think that as humans, we develop all kinds of dynamic layers to who we are and how we show up in the world. Today, I again was inspired by something that came up in my master's this week. And I just thought that it was worth taking a bit of time to talk about because I actually find it to be pretty interesting. And I just want to really come out the gates and say that I am purely speaking about a topic from my own experiences. And I'm really not coming in with any type of judgment or suggesting that anyone act or speak or do anything a certain way. I want to talk about the word triggered. And the word triggered is connected to post-traumatic stress disorder, so PTSD, and trauma. So conventionally used, or more like medically or in the psychiatry world, the word triggered is connected to trauma or traumatic experiences. And so that is not necessarily what I am going to dig deeply into. I want to talk about the use and potential misuse or potential overuse of the word or the concept triggered, being triggered. So I think language is very powerful and very important. And I think we are in a world where we talk a lot, we express ourselves a lot, we are constantly changing the way we talk, we're constantly being introduced to new words, and words develop new meaning and associations. Like, we are just getting really creative with the way we express ourselves. And that is beautiful. And I think, the whole demure TikTok that went viral, like, that brought the word demure back into common language, whereas it's always been a word, but it hasn't been used in the way that it's being used now. And I just think that's so interesting. Like, I think the way we express ourselves is powerful, like I said. And I think that we go through phases of the type of language we use. I think our language has evolved significantly. We all can probably think of words that were once okay to say that are no longer okay to say. And I think that's happening more and more. And it's not that there is, the policing of language and how people are developing different sort of social rules or expectations or norms with their language. And I just think it's really important that we carry a sense of awareness and mindfulness when we use our words. I think that that's just a pretty safe rule to live by. So when I think of the word triggered, I do think of its overuse. I think of it as being at a stage where people are using the word triggered in many, many situations where they are not indeed triggered by a trauma. So if we think about how it's kind of been intended to be used in the mental health field, in the medical field, in the psychiatric field, we are straying quite far from those associations in the kind of everyday use of the word. And what I mean by that is like, and I will take full responsibility here. Like, I have been in several situations where I kind of jokingly will be like, I'm so triggered. And it's just a form of expression. I do think that there is the possibility that by overusing it or misusing it, we are growing disconnected from the true meaning of the word and what it actually means to be in a triggered state. And without trying to act like I know everything, being in a triggered state, so actually being, overcome by PTSD or a trauma, that can actually yield really dangerous, that can be a really overwhelming, a really scary place to be. So we are using it so commonly and so frequently that there is the chance that we are taking away from its proper use. We are using it so frequently that there could very likely be people who are indeed triggered and may not be taken seriously, because it's hard to know when we're using a word so much in so many different situations. We may be now missing opportunities to actually take people seriously when they are, in fact, in a triggered state. And I wanted to talk a little bit about how it came up in conversation in my master's program and what kind of is leading me into this conversation. So we were analyzing a case study, and my professor just sort of put out a word of caution around the word triggered. And if I'm remembering correctly, she kind of was suggesting that we shouldn't impose the experience of triggered onto our client. So we shouldn't sort of use that blanket statement or that broad label of, oh, they're triggered. Because the word triggered doesn't actually help us understand what's going on. And in this case, there was so much context to this case study, like to this individual that we were analyzing, that she was basically saying, like, calling him triggered doesn't cut it. We need to actually understand what is going on. And if this client is triggered, what does that actually mean for them? Like, what does that look like? what are their symptoms, and what is the cause of this triggered state. We need to use effective curiosity and assessment to actually unpack what is triggering an individual and why they might be susceptible to being triggered. So that's just kind of like the counseling lens, is that we can't just throw that word around and expect that to be kind of like, there, I figured it out, they're triggered. I have a understanding of the situation. And I know I'm not like, I don't want everyone to like walk away from this episode and be like, oh, like I have to respond in such a serious way anytime I hear this word. Like, we can still be cheeky. We can still use the word. But I think it's just important to have an awareness that words hold meaning. And it's good for at least us to know what meaning we are intending when using certain words. The other thing that I'm kind of thinking about is that, and I want to tread lightly here because I really don't want to cast any type of judgment or, I'm just coming at this with good intentions. And it's something that I've just kind of realized or been noticing as the result of COVID and our experience societally with the pandemic, is that, and I don't think it's the pandemic in isolation. I think it's there's more to this situation, but it became kind of clear because COVID is like a marker of time in my mind, like 2020 to now. And that is that as a society, there seems to be this lowered capacity. So this like lowered emotional threshold. And I don't think that's necessarily bad. I think I touched on this in my last episode, where we may just finally have been given the permission to speak to our needs and to be honest about where we're at. But I do see that because the world is so complex and because there is so much going on and because we are all balancing so much and juggling so much and being faced with so much external stimulus, that we are resorting to words like triggered, being like, I am at my capacity. I have a way lower threshold for discomfort or for I think discomfort, because what I really think about when someone is saying that they're triggered, I am actually usually not assuming that someone is in a PTSD triggered state or a traumatized state. I am more inclined to think that they are experiencing a level of discomfort. It's like not really enough to say, I'm uncomfortable, so I don't want to come to work today, or I'm uncomfortable, I don't want to go to that meeting, or I'm uncomfortable, etc., etc., etc. It's almost as if we have resorted to stronger language to speak to our discomfort. And discomfort is a spectrum, right? Like that could mean so many different things. And this isn't to say that we shouldn't be able to speak to these discomforts. We shouldn't be able to have our needs met. But I think that we don't think that that's, a good enough reason to kind of speak to our needs or to express ourselves, that we are attaching different language to our experience. And I see that, people, and I fall into this category too. Like, if I am just needing a mental health day, if I'm just like waking up and I'm tired, I'm unmotivated, maybe I'm bloated, maybe my ankle hurts, I don't feel like those are reasons enough to be like, I can't come into work today, or to cancel on some type of obligation, or to just generally decrease my output for that day. I feel like we are like now using bigger excuses or bigger reasons, and sometimes even lying about like what is truly going on for ourselves, because as a society we haven't just like fully figured out the balance of this life. And so yeah, I'm just really curious about this idea of just being uncomfortable or being tired or being burnt out, and all these lesser or like low level experiences that we're not running to the emergency room. We're not running to a psychiatrist's office. We're not, we're just kind of out here trying to do our best. And sometimes that can be really hard to do. It can be really hard to do our best. Sometimes our best isn't all that much. I think that word kind of just is a gateway to speaking about language in general, and speaking about the weight that it can carry and what we're not saying in our language. Not just what we are saying, but what aren't we saying? It's a loaded word. It's a loaded word. I don't think we should go around policing people, really asking them, are you actually triggered? That's not helpful. And that's certainly not what I'm suggesting. I am suggesting that we as individuals who are in control of our own language and who are experts of our own experience, to just have an awareness of our language and how we use it and how we're intending to use it. And I think on the note of like our exhausted, overwhelmed, burnt out, overstimulated existence, I do think that we are setting ourselves up to, not us as individuals, but societally, I do think we are being put in situations where our threshold is down, our tolerance is down, our capacity is down. And that is risky territory to be in, because when we are so burnt out and we're overworked and we're underpaid and life just keeps lifing and we don't really feel like we have the supports in place, that we have the confidence and the voice or the resources to actually speak to our needs, that can put us in very vulnerable situations where we're vulnerable. I'll just put it at that. I have so much empathy and compassion for all of us, because I think that we are all currently just trying to do the best with what we have, and sometimes that doesn't feel like enough. If I can just give you one little nugget, your needs are important, your time is important, your body, your mind is important, your community is important. So if whatever you can do to prioritize those things and speak to your needs in a way that feels safe, feels honest, that's really what it's all about. Once again, this is Corie with the People Pleaser Podcast. Thank you so much for supporting the podcast. And if you liked what you heard, please consider leaving a 5-star rating and a review on either Apple Podcasts or Spotify. You can find daily content from me on both Instagram and TikTok. Thank you so much for listening, and I will catch you on the next episode.